Hello. We are here in London. Today is 17th of November. It's 2012, and we are here to meet with Dr. Sander, and we are very exciting to be here. Thank you a lot for your disponibility. During these 50 years, has your way of doing psychoanalysis that your students changed?
Yes, it has changed very much. Because when I first came to England, I first of all specialized in child analysis under the direction of Anna Freud. So although she gave us a very comprehensive teaching, and we were learning very much all the papers and the books of Freud, it was very limited to Freudian ideas, of course. Plus the adaptations that Anna Freud herself had done so that psychoanalysis should be suitable to be used with children. But when I later did the training at the Institute of Psychoanalysis in London, I discovered that many of my colleagues had developed further ideas under the influence of, for example, Winnicott and mostly Melanie Klein. And it was very interesting because I felt very privileged. I had a very good background about classical psychoanalysis. So I was not really so scared or made insecure by hearing other things because I had my basis. I knew from where I was. But sometimes some of the things at first seemed so incomprehensible that I just rejected it. But after a few months and weeks and I would say years, I started to think that some of the ideas were absolutely fascinating. Particularly, for example, the greater emphasis on object relationship. Not just that you listen to the patient and you tell the patient what he feels or what the problem or the conflicts are, but that you take yourself very much into account and that you listen very carefully to what the patient makes of you, how he deforms what you say and who you are. Yeah. And that is very telling and very helpful, for example. So I would say, and then my experience with the years also make me, also I think it allowed me to be more different with some patient and in other. I'm not always working quite the same way with all my patients, which is also, I think, very important.
During the same 50 years, have you found changes in the types of disease or in the age? Have the personality adaptive structures of patients changed?
It's a very interesting question, and I would say in the depths, I don't think I've seen many changes, because if the choice that the patients have made are to make a neurotic choice, in the end it will be the same as it used to be 20 years ago. What has changed maybe is the type of patients who come. For me, when I first worked with children with Anna Freud, I got to see quite a number of children of poor family families because Anna Freud was, had money and we could see children free of charge. So we saw a much wider range that I saw when I started to work privately, where I needed to be paid something. And so that changed in that sense. But of course the illness in the heart of the child was the same. What has altered, I think, over the time is that it has become obvious that elderly people seem to live much longer and are aware that when you are 60 or 65, you have really quite a lot of life in front of you. And that has brought, at least to me, I see quite a large proportion of my patients are in their 60s, or I even have a patient who is 75 in analysis or in therapy. I mean, now I make a difference between analysis when the patient comes very frequently, many times during the week, maybe 3, 4 or 5 times, mostly four or five, and they lie on the couch. And the people who come just once a week or maybe twice a week, some lie on the couch if they wish, but many sit down. And that's right. And the relation becomes a little different if you look at the other person or if you prefer to lie down so that you can forget more that you have that you are talking to another person, but more that you want to talk about things that you feel inside yourself. And the person to whom you talk, although this person is very important, it becomes a different, more imaginary person in the mind of the patient, which is a great difference between psychoanalysis and psychotherapy.
Nowadays, time has acquired a different value. Waiting seems impossible. The time of thinking seems obsolete. The present and the immediate dominate everything. The future doesn't seem to be thinkable. What's your opinion?
I think there's been an enormous change with all the IT that exists in the world now. I mean, you don't send letters, but you write emails and you get the answer within 5 minutes, and you don't. I mean, every communication has become much faster. There are no more distance. You can phone to the other side of the earth. It doesn't cost much money, and in this sense, yes, everything is much quicker, much faster. I think that there was always a tendency in the human mind to avoid pain and to try to live according to the pleasure principle, if I can put it. And I don't think that has changed. I think maybe the outward signs have changed. But I think if a patient suffers sufficiently or is sufficiently aware that he or she is obliged to do things either in the relationship with other people or alone in his, with himself, which are really not in his best interest. After a while, maybe this person will try to find some help. And very often they will not come directly to the psychologist because the idea is that it's, you know, you are mad if you go to the psychologist. So you probably first go either to a teacher, or if you are young, or maybe to the GP. And some GPs are well informed and they will realize that the person has a psychological conflict and will send them to us. many times the patients will have had quite a number of other treatment which have failed, and they come to us as a last resort very often.
Very often, yeah.
And then we have our patients. I think personally, I believe, and I'm talking now about psychoanalysis, that we have to be aware that psychoanalysis will never be popular, because it's a difficult process, it's a process in depth, it takes time, it costs money, and people will naturally want to do something quicker.
Yeah.
But there will also, I think, always be the need for people who are really stuck to find the courage to undergo a more lengthy treatment of a psychological awareness, which can change lives, which is very important. Now, I think I also should be very clear. I think that psychoanalysis 4 or 5 times a week, I think are for the very few.
Yeah.
I don't think that the ordinary person who is possibly not so wealthy that money doesn't matter, and who is in a position to give the time, because when you come to analysis, it's 50 minutes that you see the doctor. It's not 10 minutes or 5 minutes.
Yes.
And 4 times or 5 times, here in England we do it 5 times. It's a lot of time also. But I think for people who have the interest and have the money and the possibility, and understand that the discovery of how you deal with the difficulties and the pleasure of life can change your life if you really understand. For those privileged, I would say, they should have the possibility. But from a general point of view, I think what psychoanalysis has done is allowed many psychotherapeutic work to be done, which is an adaptation of psychoanalysis, and that can be done twice, once, 3 times a week for much shorter period. When I say much shorter, I mean 1 or 2 years rather than 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
But I think we shouldn't confuse the two.
Yeah.
I think the people who work as therapists need to have had a proper and good and lengthy training. But if they have done that, they can adapt their knowledge to something more limited, but which can be also very helpful.
In the clinical work, we come across some new symptoms related to the addiction, craving, gambling, internet addiction associated with the new technologies, not only with digital natives. Which theoretical references can we use? Lability of self, do we have to formulate new working hypotheses?
I would like to answer this in two ways. Yeah. First, in a more general way, because I do believe that with our new acquired capacity of digital use, both the computer and our mobile telephone, and many other systems, we have given us all, adults and children, a way of diverting our way of playing and relaxing. Yeah. And we have both acquired new skills, and I'm thinking of the children's capacity, for example, to write a message at a speed which is amazing, And I think none of the older adults can have a chance to compete. And it's a skill.
It's a neurological difference for
That's
me,
right.
you know?
Probably, yes, absolutely.
In 10 years, the child have a neurological connection different.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, I think that when the child uses the computer all day long and play games all the time and so on, these are the same kind of activities that they did before in a more in a different way, that they were dreaming all the time of being a captain so-and-so or the dictator so-and-so, or that they were killing 1,000 people because they were so strong and whatever. I don't think that basically in the conflict between love and hate and in the conflict between the responsibility of being grown up and being a child and so on, anything has changed. And I think, for example, gambling was always there. Now we have through the computer it's maybe a bit easier. You can send your bets more quickly. But basically, if you're a gambler, now I don't think you're a different gambler in depth from what you were 20 years ago.
Okay.
And with the children who play, and there are many who are really doing nothing else if they didn't need to go to school, but to play games. And the moment they come home, they are really addicted to this. I am not sure that it is in its essence, again, very different from what we did earlier without it. Other children found other things. I mean, I remember very early in my career, I was sent a child who was spending all his time drawing, but not drawing in a creative way. I mean, he could have been a budding artist, but he was really filling the pages with color, one page after another. And he would watch it. And it was really a sign of, for example, with this boy, that he couldn't think of the terribly overwhelming thoughts that he had after his mother died. You know, and it was a way of doing something thoughtlessly, but he was active.
Yeah.
And if he had lived 20 years later, he would have been somebody who would have played one game after another.
I see.
So I don't think that crucially there is a difference. On the other hand, it of course marks these children, and it creates an interest which is different from 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago when it didn't exist. The same thing is the ease with which children can access the internet and get information, and the use they make, of course, of games, endless games, which gives them an enormous sense of power and also new skills. You have to be very quick to kill all these robots who come and attack. And you can look at it also from a positive way, and how you can play games of chess and all sorts of intelligent game also by yourself with a pretend partner. Now it does cause, and here is where I would like to differentiate. I think it can become for some individual, it doesn't need to be children, it can be adult, an escape route. You don't need other people, you can do it all by yourself. You don't need to go out in the afternoon, you are not lonely, you have your computer. Yeah. You can get information very quickly, so you don't need so much to go to the library and to search and to... Certainly, this is true. But the children who take refuge, for example, in constant television play, I think they have found a new way to cope with something which existed before. Either that they have great difficulty at school, or that they have sexual problems which haunt them, or aggressive problems, or a lack of social skills, or whatever it can be, and they retire then to the comfort of a game, or of an afternoon or days of games. So the structure of what you will find if these individuals come to treatment, I think, will not be very different. That would be. But I think that there is an alteration in the capacity we have now to retreat from the world. There is an increased number of people who have a real problem in consulting the real dialogue with other people, which can be bypassed because you do it all and you have your boyfriend on the computer through a line and you talk with him and you fall in love with a person you don't even really, you have never seen except a photograph. And you spend a long conversation with them. It's a completely different way of relating. And that we don't really quite know yet the consequences. You could say that in some way, for some people who were very cut off and very shy and very lonely, it is a godsend. It's a wonderful thing. But it has the danger also to appeal and reinforce the tendency to loneliness and to be cut off from the world.
From the contact.
And the contact. And that it can... I think that there is a discovery nowadays, certainly in England and probably everywhere, that we have an increase of children and adolescents who come to us with the label autistic. We had less. Now it's very difficult for us to be sure whether it's not that we are better at diagnostic capacity, and so we see it more, just as, you know, many years ago we didn't quite see so much the abuse which children could be under. Now we are more sensitive to it, and we see that abused children are not such an exception. There are many who are used by members of the family or uncles or aunts and so on. Have we become more sensitive and we can diagnose more easily the autism or autistic traits, or is it that it has increased and that would be due to our possibility of using all sorts of IT's instruments, whether it's mobile telephone or television? I don't think we have the answer. I wouldn't dare to say yet, oh yes, it's the fault of the one. I'm not sure.
Nowadays, in Italy, we often talk about psychological work as a way to reach a sort of wellness, instead of a means to take care of people in the case of suffering or illness. It's a sign of the cultural period we are living, ein Zeitgeist.
What you are talking about is a feeling that people are not really interested, or are also impatient about what they really think or what they really feel. The only thing is they should be made to feel good.
Yes.
That's the really aim of their life. Okay. And as long as they feel good, they don't worry.
Yes.
Now, I think that when I look at the films or the plays of the pre-war period, and maybe even more before the First World War, one has a feeling that there was a sense of elation that the world would be wonderful and would go on to be wonderful forever, and that one should enjoy life to the full. And war certainly stopped this. People suffered all over Europe in various degrees, but it was a bad period of stress and austerity. I would imagine now, with the crisis, the economic crisis, in order to cope with the anxiety and the fears that we all have, where will we go, what will happen? One of our reaction is, let's turn a blind eye and let's pretend. Let's have a, feel good and go and enjoy ourselves. Now, I don't think that it is such a surprise that this is the case. But I think for some people, certainly, it is a short-sightedness. Like the parents who have a child who needs help and they constantly think, oh, he will grow out of it. I don't think you grow out of a really deep problem of depression or deep problem of anxiety or phobias. And you can try to think of wanting to have a good time and going drinking with your friends and feeling wonderful. The next morning you feel again not so wonderful. So I think one understands the wish. It would be much nicer to be able to feel great and go from one tree to another. But I think my feeling is that the conflict between people, the demands of work, the demands of the family, the loneliness, the internal pain, maybe more in the privacy of your home, will take over. And you can do a little bit of painting over, but there are sometimes it's not enough. That would be my answer. And to paint over too often is dangerous because you lose precious time. And then you have people who have suffered. I mean, just yesterday I interviewed somebody who suffered from the age of 17 and tried to commit suicide at the age of 18. He pulls himself out of it, but now he comes at the age of 53, feeling exactly as awful as he felt as an adolescent. And he wants help. I'm delighted that he wants help, but it feels sad that he should have lived all these years thinking he would have a good time, it would pass. And he didn't.
Looking to the future, can give us, from your perspective, some direction. What do you think will be useful for the younger generation of analysts?
It's not an easy question you are raising, and certainly we can look at it from two sides. First, from the more narrow point of view of the psychoanalyst, not the psychotherapist, but the psychoanalyst. And there is, I think, in the world of psychoanalysis, some groups which have started to feel somewhat disaffiliated. They feel that there is less and less interest in psychoanalysis, with the medical current of new drugs and new discovery. People tend to take more and more medication, and some people feel that psychoanalysis is menaced both through this angle and also because from psychoanalysis has been created so many kinds of psychotherapy. some which are psychoanalytically oriented, like you, but also many who make a mixture of some ideas of Freud, but many more simple directive taken from psychology, with a message which they feel can help patient in 2-3 sessions, and it's finished. And of course these methods, which claim that they have very good results, are very attractive to the states and to psychiatry, because we cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And of course the big question which we are always accused of is that we don't have results, we don't have clear results, we don't do research showing the improvement, but we only say that the patients improve, whilst other psychological approaches have a real psychometric proof of results. So this is not going to make our task better. And with a multiplication of psychotherapeutic approach, we will always be in a minority, and we will always have the no proper financial help from the state, because we are just too expensive. And I think there comes the identification that the young trainee can acquire from his or her training. And I think if you have had a training which has really changed you and made you feel that you have understood something very important about yourself that you want to give to others, and that it's solid and it's comprehensive, I think you will go on struggling, because you believe in what you do, and you will stay with it. However, if you are not trained and you have properly and over a period of sufficient years, and if it's only some kind of hobby or some kind of trick that you have learned, then I think the danger is very great for the future, because you will get more and more difficulty to get paid, more and more difficulty to get real patients. It won't come easy, and if then you lose your heart, you are not sure anymore that what you do is really of value, you will sink. And for me, that's the answer comes that as long as people will really believe in the depth and value and development also of psychoanalysis, despite all the difficulties, I think I see a good future for our science. It won't be easy, and I don't think that what we offer is for the masses. I think it's for those who really understand and cherish the complexity of the human mind. If you want to have a simpler answer and be happy tomorrow, you shouldn't come to us.
Or today.
Yeah.
Now, tell us what you want about your life and your story.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk, and I will just tell you a few things. I was born in Geneva from a middle-class family. We were 2 children, an elder brother and I. And I grew up being very interested in how people think. That's why we do things the way we do it, why we react the way we. All my life, I thought it was very interesting to watch people. And when I became adolescent, I thought that because I had this interest and because I was very keen and interested in children, I've always regretted that my parents did not have more children, so that I wasn't the little one. I thought I would be teacher. And then I realized that the year before I was going to university, that in fact I wasn't interested in the teaching, but I was interested in how children function. So I thought then maybe it's better to go to do a psychology degree. And I was very lucky because it was wartime and Piaget was in Geneva. And at the time in Geneva, the psychology faculty was not very big, and we were located in a different building than the big university, and it gave us a very nice family atmosphere, which was extremely pleasant, and I really very much enjoyed working with Piaget. And he used his students to do research with him. So we were not only given a lot of theoretical project and literature to study, but we really studied also the children in the field, which was wonderful. And after a few years, he asked me to be his assistant, which I very much enjoyed. Of course, his main assistant was a woman called Barbara Inhelder, but afterwards he had a few lesser people. Yeah. And I very much enjoyed his understanding of the child, how the child developed in the course of his life and made sense of the world around him, and how he constructed, in a way, like a scientist, the whys and how of to make sense of his world around him. And I think this notion that we need to make sense of what happens to us, and that sometimes we make conclusions which are correct, but sometimes they are completely in the domain of imagination. But they nevertheless, if there are good tries, will help us to make sense of the life. After I finished with my degree in psychology, there was a possibility for me either to continue, and I was offered even a job in Germany to do research, but along the line of Piaget, or to go into psychoanalysis. And I felt very tempted to go along, to open a completely new door by going into psychoanalysis. And I met a young woman who became a great friend of mine, who had escaped from Hungary, who was from a family of psychoanalysts. And so with her help, we both went to England, which I had first thought I could do a training in Paris, but then it became clear that England offered more, and that particularly I discovered that there was Anna Freud in London who had opened a clinic and a school training for young women or young men to learn all about child analysis. And so I came to London in 1950 and stayed ever since. So in fact, I've been longer in England than I have been at home in Geneva. The course at the Anna Freud was based on this idea that Freud had, that one should really teach psychoanalysis like a university should teach, and not just as an adjunct to a full-time job. And Anna Freud made this dream true, and at the center we were busy all day. And we did a lot of observation baby observation, toddler observation. We had a nursery school in the premise of the clinic, and we did a lot of observation of children from the age of 2.5 to 5 when they went to school. And we of course, learn all about psychoanalysis, but also all about the application of psychoanalysis to the outside world. So, for example, in 1950 in England, it was thought that it was a good idea to separate children who went to hospital, even if they were tiny, because they were upset when their parents or mothers were there, they would cry. And if they were left alone, it was much easier. They were very soon quiet and very obedient. And that was thought to be the right thing to do. And Anna Freud fought very much with the help of one of us called James Robertson, and made films to show the distress of the children who were left in hospital to have surgery, usually. And she managed, with these films and with her work, to make sure that visiting was permitted. And nowadays, in England, no child under the age of 6 is accepted without the mother. And it's absolutely clear that the parents can stay overnight and support the children. So there is one example. She has also helped to rewrite the family laws. I mean, she went and worked with lawyers to explain the needs of children in case of divorce, in case of brutality from the parents when the children have to be taken out, how to deal with it, the consequences of violence, and so on. And she had a great influence in the writing of these laws. So she taught also a lot to nurses, to teachers, to parents, and to lawyers and doctors, pediatricians particularly. Now, when I finished the course with Anna Freud, I had found the man I wanted to marry. He had been training at the institute, and he attended also one meeting that we had regularly, which was on Wednesday afternoon, where people from the institute who were interested in child analysis were invited. And so that's where we met, and we married in '57. And then I had my family. I have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. And after my son started nursery school, I went back to have another psychoanalysis, this time with Mrs. Gombreuil, that you seem to know. My first analyst was an English lady called Dr. Bonnard. What was very interesting is that the teaching at the Anna Freud Center was, of course, very strictly Freudian. Anna Freud was attached to her father, and she taught her father's idea. But Anna Freud was also aware that by doing child analysis, she discovered new things. And so it is important to underline that Anna Freud also created new ideas. And we can see it already in her book on her mechanism of defense, of the mechanism, where she enlarges the thoughts of her father. She doesn't only repeat it. But nevertheless, the ambience in the clinic was clearly that we learned a tiny bit about the idea of Winnicott, but not very much, and not at all about Melanie Klein. Now, when I went to the Institute of Psychoanalysis, it was after the war, so after the very famous controversial discussion, which have been translated now in all languages. But the atmosphere in the Institute was still very adversarial. I mean, it wasn't unfrequent that a very strong Kleinian student, let's say, would not want to have anything to do with a Freudian, you know. And the people who were interested in Winnicott were a little bit in between. They had difficulty also. This has changed over the years, I'm glad to say, and I think we are less threatened now by our differences, but more able to get enriched. So in that sense, I think that my work has developed, partly because I've hopefully learned from my mistakes and from my experience, but also because I've been helped by encountering people who saw things differently. And then you learn. You reject certain things. I can't really myself really get very convinced about this very active psychic life that Melanie Klein believes exists in the child under 1 year. I do think that the child under 1 year is developed at a tremendous rate and is very aware of the mother and the people around them. But I think their structures are still so fluid that I think we can only guess at best what is happening in their mind, but I don't think it is really solid enough to create a whole network of fantasies, which Melanie Klein believes. I do think that, however, these first months of life and later the first and second year are enormously important, but more because it has to do with making sense of the world around, the great importance of the relationship with the mother, the father, the sibling, the dog, the home, and how the child manages these things, and how the child's inner creation and fantasies then is able to remain fluid and can change. Now, when I started the Institute, I must say rather quickly I gave up the clinical work with children. I found it very difficult to have my own children and then present them with patients in the afternoon. I felt I couldn't do that. But with adult patients, I could see them when they were at school, and when they came home, they had a mum. So I did one thing I did when I worked with Anna Freud, which was for me of an enormous interest. We did a very great research on children who were born blind. Yeah. No, children who had never seen, yeah, as opposed to children who became blind. And we had a little nursery school for them, and then we had 1 or 2 of these children in therapy. And it was quite challenging to understand their inner world. I mean, they couldn't see their mother, they could just hear, they couldn't see us, they could just hear. How did they manage to learn and to develop? And we discovered quite a very important number of things, particularly the enormous importance of the link with the mother and how the child learns to listen and to feel the most delicate interaction between mother and child, and later between therapist and child. I've been very blessed because, of course, my husband was also a psychoanalyst, and for example, just very practically, the importance of transference was much more central in my learning at the Institute of Psychoanalysis, yeah, because it was thought by Anna Freud that in children, especially when they are very small, although there is an affection and a relationship to the therapist, the really very important affects remain linked to the mother. So when I went to the institute, I had to learn to listen and watch much more about the transference movement in my adult patient. And this opened the route for me to be equally interested, very sensitive to the relationship that the patients do with us and their fantasies about us and what they imagine we are, and realizing that in fact they don't know us, but they think they do know us, and how to use that to help to the patient, to help me to know what's going on with the patient. It was a very fruitful relationship with my husband. I was the most enthusiastic with clinical work. My husband was more the knowledgeable man who loved to research and to write. We wrote some things together, but of course the majority of his work are his idea and his developing psychoanalysis. Now I'm a training analyst, and for many years, and I've done a lot of teaching, and I give talks. I learned from my husband how nice and how enriching it is to speak abroad. He was invited a great deal in the States, and I had the privilege to go with him and to listen. And I really realized how helpful it is to hear people with different views. And so I've continued to go sometimes to Italy, sometimes to Germany, sometimes to other countries in Europe. I'm now old and I do much less, but I still enjoy my life. I enjoy my family, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren.
Oh, your grandchildren. Oh,
thank you.
Thank you to you a lot.
Thank you.
Me, myself, and I are all in love with you. We all think you're wonderful, we do. Me, myself, and I have just one point of view. We're convinced there's no one else like you.